There are moments in life when everything you thought was stable suddenly collapses. The job disappears, the relationship ends, your health takes a turn you never expected. And in those moments, many people quietly ask themselves a painful question. What is the point of continuing when life feels this hard? Most people search for hope in comfort, success, or security. But one man discovered something shocking in the worst place imaginable. In the middle of unimaginable suffering, surrounded by death and cruelty, he found something that could not be taken from him. His name was Viktor Frankl, and the lesson he discovered about hope may be one of the most powerful ideas ever written about the human spirit. Frankl was not just a thinker, sitting safely in a university office. He was a psychiatrist who was thrown into the horrors of Nazi concentration camps during World War II. He lost his parents, his brother, and his pregnant wife. Every possession he owned was stripped away. Prisoners were starved, beaten, and forced into brutal labor. Many people in those camps slowly lost the will to live. Frankl noticed something important while observing the prisoners around him. The ones who survived mentally were not always the strongest or the healthiest. Instead, they were the ones who still believed their life had meaning, waiting for them outside the camp. What Frankl discovered during those dark years would later become the foundation of his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning. His idea was simple but incredibly powerful. Humans can endure almost any suffering if they believe their life still has meaning. In other words, hope is not something that comes from comfort or easy circumstances. It comes from purpose. When a person believes that their pain is connected to something meaningful, the mind becomes far stronger than the situation they are trapped in. Frankl noticed that many prisoners mentally collapsed the moment they believed there was nothing left to live for. Some would stop eating, stop working, and within days, their bodies would give up. But the prisoners who imagined seeing their loved ones again, finishing a piece of work they started, or contributing something meaningful to the world, were often the ones who found the strength to keep moving. Their bodies were starving just like everyone else, yet their minds held onto something powerful, a reason. This idea led Frankl to develop a psychological approach known as logotherapy. Unlike many forms of psychology that focus mainly on pleasure or avoiding pain, logotherapy focuses on meaning. Frankl believed the deepest human drive is not happiness or comfort. The deepest drive is the need for life to matter. When that sense of meaning disappears, people feel empty, lost, and hopeless. But when meaning returns, even suffering can be endured. One of Frankl's most powerful observations was that suffering itself does not destroy people. What destroys people is suffering without meaning. Imagine two people facing the exact same hardship. One believes their struggle is pointless, random, and unfair. The other believes their struggle is shaping them, strengthening them, or preparing them for something meaningful. The external situation may be identical, but the internal experience is completely different. One person collapses under the weight of adversity, while the other somehow grows stronger because of it. Frankl once wrote that everything can be taken from a person except one thing: the freedom to choose their attitude in any situation. Even inside a concentration camp, when prisoners had no control over their environment, they still had one remaining freedom. They could choose how they responded internally. Some became bitter, cruel, and hopeless. Others remained compassionate, shared food with weaker prisoners, and tried to comfort those around them. The same environment produced completely different human responses. This idea is uncomfortable because it challenges a belief many people hold today. Many people think hope must come from external change. They believe life must improve before they can feel strong again. Frankl's experience suggested something almost opposite. Hope does not always come after circumstances improve. Sometimes hope must come first, and the strength to survive grows out of that belief. Frankl himself stayed alive, partly because he imagined a future where he would stand before students again, teaching them what he had learned about the human mind during the camps. That imagined future became a form of psychological survival. Even when his body was exhausted and starving, the thought that his suffering might one day help others gave him a reason to endure another day. What makes Frankl's story so powerful is that his message was not formed in comfort. It was formed in the worst adversity imaginable, and that is exactly why it carries so much weight. When someone who has faced that level of suffering says that meaning can keep a person alive, it forces us to rethink how we approach our own challenges. Many people today feel trapped in different kinds of suffering. It may not be a concentration camp, but it can still feel overwhelming. Financial stress, broken relationships, loneliness, illness, or feeling lost in life can create the same internal question Frankl observed in the camps. What is the point of continuing? When people cannot answer that question, despair grows quickly. Frankl believed the answer is not to eliminate suffering completely, because suffering is an unavoidable part of life. Instead, the challenge is to find meaning within it. Meaning might come from caring for someone you love, building something that helps others, learning from pain, or refusing to let hardship destroy your character. When suffering is connected to meaning, it transforms from pure misery into something that can shape strength. Another powerful lesson from Frankl's life is that meaning does not have to be something massive or heroic. It can be surprisingly simple. For one prisoner, meaning might have been the dream of seeing their child again. For another, it might have been finishing a scientific theory, writing a book, or helping fellow prisoners survive another day. Meaning is deeply personal, and that is exactly why it is so powerful. No one else can define it for you. Frankl also observed that people often find meaning through three paths: creating something valuable, experiencing something meaningful like love or beauty, and facing unavoidable suffering with courage. The third path is the one most people try to avoid, but it may be the one that reveals the deepest strength within a person. When life is comfortable, it is easy to believe strength comes from success. But Frankl's experience suggests something deeper. Real strength often reveals itself when everything comfortable disappears. In those moments, the question becomes clear. Will you allow adversity to destroy your sense of purpose? Or will you transform adversity into the very reason you continue forward? And perhaps this is the most powerful idea Frankl left behind. Hope is not something the world hands to you when things go well. Hope is something you create when things go terribly wrong. It is born in the moment when you decide that your suffering will not be meaningless, that your pain will not be wasted, and that your story is not finished yet. There is another uncomfortable truth that Viktor Frankl discovered while enduring the brutal conditions of the concentration camps. He noticed that suffering alone did not automatically make people stronger or wiser. In fact, suffering often broke people. But when a person chose to confront suffering with purpose, something remarkable happened inside the human mind. The pain did not disappear, but it began to transform. Instead of being crushed by adversity, the individual began to see themselves as someone who could endure it. That shift in identity, from victim to survivor, quietly builds a kind of inner strength that cannot easily be shaken. Frankl observed that many prisoners mentally collapsed when they began focusing only on their present misery. The constant hunger, exhaustion, and humiliation could easily convince someone that life had become nothing more than endless suffering. But the prisoners who managed to psychologically survive often kept their attention fixed on something beyond the present moment. Some imagined being reunited with loved ones. Others imagined returning to their professions, continuing unfinished work, or simply telling the world what had happened inside those camps during World War II. These future visions acted like mental lifelines, pulling them forward even when the present looked hopeless. This reveals something powerful about the human mind. When people lose their sense of future, they often lose their will to endure the present. But when a person believes that something meaningful still awaits them, even the darkest moment can feel temporary. The body may be exhausted, the circumstances unbearable, but the mind continues moving toward that imagined purpose. Frankl later explained that human beings are not simply driven by pleasure or comfort, as many psychologists once believed. Instead, he argued that the deepest human motivation is the search for meaning. This idea became the foundation of a psychological approach known as logotherapy. According to this philosophy, the human spirit becomes strongest when it feels that life still has something important to ask of it. Think about how different this perspective is from the way many people approach adversity today. When something painful happens, the first reaction is often to ask, "Why is this happening to me?" That question naturally leads to frustration, resentment, and sometimes bitterness. But Frankl suggested a different question that changes everything. What is life asking of me in this moment? Instead of viewing suffering as meaningless punishment, it becomes a challenge that calls for courage, growth, or responsibility. This shift in thinking can quietly transform a person's relationship with hardship. Instead of feeling like life is attacking them, they begin to see adversity as something that demands a response. The situation may still be painful, unfair, or tragic, but it no longer defines their entire identity. The focus moves from the suffering itself to the character being built while facing it. Frankl himself experienced moments where despair nearly consumed him. Starvation, freezing temperatures, and constant fear were daily realities. Yet he forced himself to imagine standing in a lecture hall after the war, teaching students about the psychology of suffering and resilience. That mental picture became more than just imagination. It became a psychological anchor that kept him connected to a future beyond the suffering. Years later, that vision became reality through his book, Man's Search for Meaning, which went on to inspire millions of readers around the world. The very suffering that once threatened to destroy him eventually became the source of insight that helped countless others navigate their own struggles. One of the most profound lessons Frankl left behind is that meaning is not something we wait to receive from life. Meaning is something we actively discover or create through the way we respond to circumstances. Two people may experience the same hardship, yet their lives move in completely different directions, depending on how they interpret the experience. One person may see only injustice and despair, while another may see an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, or more compassionate. This idea becomes especially important when adversity seems completely unavoidable. Some hardships cannot be escaped. Illness, loss, aging, and unexpected tragedy are part of the human experience. When those moments arrive, many people feel powerless. But Frankl believed that even when we cannot control the situation itself, we still retain the power to control the meaning we assign to it. That may sound like a small difference, but psychologically, it changes everything. When suffering feels meaningless, it drains a person's spirit. But when suffering is connected to purpose, it can awaken resilience that people did not even realize they possessed. Frankl also noticed something remarkable about the people who maintained hope under extreme conditions. They often found small ways to preserve their humanity even in brutal environments. Some prisoners shared their last piece of bread with someone weaker. Others comforted fellow prisoners who were close to giving up. These small acts of kindness became quiet acts of resistance against despair. They reminded the prisoners that even when the world around them had become cruel, they still had the ability to choose compassion. Those choices mattered more than they appeared on the surface. In environments designed to strip away dignity, every act of kindness became proof that the human spirit could not be completely crushed. Even when freedom, comfort, and safety had been taken away, the ability to choose one's response remained. This is why Frankl believed adversity often reveals the deepest truths about a person's character. When life is easy, it is difficult to know what someone truly values. But when hardship arrives, the core of a person becomes visible. Some collapse into resentment, while others rise into courage, empathy, and resilience. Frankl's philosophy does not pretend that suffering is pleasant or desirable. It acknowledges that pain is real and often brutal. But it also suggests that within adversity lies an opportunity to discover something powerful about the human spirit, the ability to endure, adapt, and find purpose, even when circumstances seem unbearable. And perhaps this is why Frankl's ideas continue to resonate decades later. Because adversity is not limited to one era or one tragedy. Every generation faces its own forms of struggle. The situations may look different, but the internal battle remains the same, whether to surrender to despair or to search for meaning in the midst of hardship. When people discover that their suffering can still serve a purpose, something inside them begins to shift. The same difficulty that once felt like an ending begins to look like a turning point. And that realization often becomes the first step toward rebuilding hope, even in the face of adversity. And when you step back and look at everything Viktor Frankl endured, the lesson becomes impossible to ignore. Hope is not something fragile that only exists when life is easy. It is something far deeper, something that can survive even in the harshest conditions imaginable. Frankl didn't just talk about resilience. He lived it in a place where most people would have completely lost themselves. And what he proved is this: even when life strips everything away from you, it can never take your ability to decide what your suffering means. That is where your power lies. Not in controlling every outcome, not in avoiding every hardship, but in choosing your response when life becomes difficult. The moment you decide that your pain will not be wasted, that your struggles will shape you instead of break you, you begin to take back control of your story, and that is where hope is born, not from comfort, but from the decision to keep going with purpose. So if you're in a season of adversity right now, if life feels heavy, unfair, or uncertain, understand this: your story is not over. There is still something ahead of you that needs you. There is still meaning waiting to be discovered, even in this moment. And sometimes, the very thing that feels like it's destroying you is quietly building the strongest version of who you're meant to become. Don't rush to escape the struggle. Learn to stand inside it and ask yourself a better question. Not, why is this happening to me? But what can I become through this? Because the answer to that question can change everything. If this message spoke to you, make sure you subscribe to Psychovest for more deep, thought-provoking insights on Stoicism, mindset, and personal transformation. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that their struggle still has meaning. And in the comments, let me know, what is one hardship in your life right now that you're choosing to turn into strength? Because the moment you give your pain a purpose is the moment it loses its power over you.